He is the author of, I believe, 3 editions now of More Guns, Less Crime. This book has been used to counter the anti-gun media now for well over 10 years. He also is the author of his new release called At the Brink. Please help me welcome Dr. John Lott, Jr.
Well, it's a real honor to be here. I appreciate it. I think the key word here is safety. If the debate's going to be won, it's going to have to be won on whether or not allowing people to defend themselves save lives or not. Too much of this debate right now is based on emotions and what people are seeing in the media. The understandable reaction that people have when they see something bad happens with a gun, whether it be a new town or something else, is to go and take away guns. And it's understandable when you see this in the media. I mean, without trying, people can think of recalling what they think are thousands of stories that they've seen on national media about bad things that happen with guns. But when was the last time you saw a story on the national news about somebody using a gun to protect themselves or protect somebody else? You may see a few of those, but it's overwhelmingly lopsided on the one side. If you go and look at the evidence that's there, the Department of Justice, FBI indicates that there's about 300,000 crimes that are committed each year with guns. If you look at the surveys that they do, because not all crimes are reported to the police, obviously, it's about 450,000 crimes that are committed with guns. By contrast, similar surveys indicate that people use guns to protect themselves and stop crimes about 2 million times a year. That's 4 to 5 times more frequently each year that people use guns to stop crime than they use them to commit them. My research tells me that the police are the single most important factor for reducing crime. But I think if you go and talk to the police, one thing that they'll make clear is that they understand that they virtually always arrive on the crime scene after the crime's occurred. And that raises the question, what should potential victims do to be able to protect themselves when the police can't be there? Now, there's lots of research I could go into. I'll just leave you with a couple simple facts. And one is, every place in the world that's banned guns, we've seen murder rates go up, and often by large amounts. Americans are familiar with what's happened in Washington, D.C. and Chicago when guns were banned, but it's just not in the United States. People who support gun bans would go and say, well, it's not really a fair test in D.C. and Chicago because unless you ban guns every place, you can't expect it to work where we do ban it because criminals will get guns from Maryland, Virginia, or from the rest of Illinois. Here's the problem. One is, it's not clear how that explains why murder rates went up. It may explain why they didn't go down a lot. But secondly, you can look around the world. We have island nations which have no neighbor that they can go and blame for having problems with guns, that have banned guns, entire nations that have banned guns, and yet every single time that guns have been banned, murder rates and violent crime rates have gone up. You know, often people will go and point to some other country and say, well, look at the United Kingdom. They have relatively low gun ownership and relatively few murders. There's a simple response when people bring up those types of things. And that is just to point out that before they had their regulations, they had even lower murder rates. Murder rates vary across countries for many different reasons. But the point is that when you disarm law-abiding good citizens, when they're less able to go and defend themselves, criminals have an easier time of committing crimes. You know, we all want to try to keep guns away from criminals. But the problems that you face with many different types of gun laws is who's most likely to obey them. And the problem that you face is that even though the laws may, to some extent, take guns away from criminals, they are much more likely usually to take guns away from law-abiding citizens. Let me give you a couple examples just with the debate that we have right now here in Connecticut and across the nation. One of the rules that you have are all these registration rules that are going to be going into effect. We've tried registration in parts of the United States. They've tried it in other parts of the world. Hawaii's had registration of guns for over 50 years. Canada, other countries have had guns for registration for many decades also. Hawaii, despite having it for over 50 years, could not point to one single crime that's been solved as a result of registration. Canada, which just got rid of its registration for long guns and has had registration of handguns since the 1930s, one of the reasons why it got rid of the registration for long guns is that they could not point to one single crime that had been solved as a result of registration. Why is that the case? Well, in theory, the way registration works, that if a criminal goes and commits a crime, and they leave the gun at the crime scene, then you can go and trace the gun back to the criminal, presuming that they're the ones that it was registered to. It doesn't work out that way. One, crime guns are very rarely left at the scene. When they are left at the scene, it's because the criminal's either been killed or wounded, so you're going to catch them anyway. And secondly, in the few times that they are registered, they're never registered to the person that committed the crime. But here's a problem that you face, and that is something that's not talked about in any of this debate, is that all these laws might have some benefits, but they also have costs. So for example, in Hawaii, in 2000, the police reported in just Honolulu that they took 50,000 hours of police time each year to do the registration. The problem is, that's 50,000 hours worth of police time in just one city. Police do lots of valuable things. Police are extremely important in reducing crime. We're taking them away from valuable things that they can do that we know save lives. We know they can go and arrest people. We know that they can deter crime from occurring. But if you take 50,000 hours worth of police time and have them do something that hasn't solved one crime, that's bad. Look, here, Canada, other places, Canada spent billions of dollars on their registration for long guns. They could have gone and hired something like about 40 to 50,000 more police officers each year. That's a lot of crimes that they could have solved for things that we know work that they weren't able to do because they were wasting money on registration. Look at background checks that we have. Everyone here wants to try to keep criminals from getting guns. There's no debate about that. But the problem is that the current background check system that we have is a mess. You may not realize this, but let me give you an example. The president, for example, has made continually the claim that 2 million dangerous people that have been prevented from buying guns because of background checks. That's simply not true. What he should have said is he should have said there are 2 million initial denials. There's a huge difference between initial denials and dangerous people prevented from having a gun. Let me just give you a simple example. The late Senator Ted Kennedy, 5 times he was on the no-fly list. 5 times he was initially denied being able to go and fly on a plane. He later flew, but I assume the president wouldn't go and count that as 5 times we stopped a terrorist from flying. Here's the problem. When you look, you just can't count all these initial denials as bad people that you stopped from getting a gun. At least 95% of those initial denials were false positives. And we can't tell exactly because the annual reports don't give us all the data that's necessary, but my guess is it's probably over 99% of these initial denials are false positives. Here's the issue that you face. Most of these people, most of these law-abiding citizens who are stopped, it's probably just an inconvenience. They'll live. But when you're talking about 2 million people, you're going to be talking about a small but significant number of people who really need to get a gun quickly for self-defense, who can't wait months to be able to go and obtain a gun. If a woman's being stalked or threatened, she may only have days in order to try to get a weapon for self-defense. Unfortunately, this 2 million number is just part of the problem. There's another 12 million people who were delayed for 3 days being able to go and get a gun. Now, 3 days is not months as we have with the 2 million people. But when you're talking about 12 million people, in that case, such a huge number, you're going to run into a small, but again, statistically significant number of individuals who really did need a gun quickly to defend themselves and were stopped from doing so. The debate that we have and people rushing through legislation within a day or within hours of getting it passed is there's no discussion of these trade-offs. There's no discussion that despite what might be good intentions on many people's part, that you're denying people the ability to go and defend themselves when they have to depend on only themselves in order to try to accomplish that defense. Now, one of the common features, and I'll just mention this, my own research and that of other independent academics has found that just the 3-day delay alone is associated with a couple percent increase in rapes and a couple percent increase in aggravated assaults against women. I'm not going to go and argue that's a huge effect, but it's the net effect of having just that 3-day delay that's there. For those couple percent, that's a significant delay, and it's something that we need to talk about in terms of these debates. One of the big other things that's been pushed in these laws across the country right now, including Connecticut, is additional taxes and fees essentially on people being able to go and obtain a gun. In Maryland, the law that they just passed there, it's going to cost at least $350 to license and register a gun in the state. Colorado has new taxes. New York, it's going to be an additional $85 to go and transfer guns than it was before. You know, the $35 fee that you have here just adds on top of additional costs that you have in going through a licensed dealer. They're going to charge